Hi, everybody. It's Monday. It's right after Pesach, and it is 2 o'clock in Israel, and it is time for Pirkei Avot History and Ashkafa, brought to you by the Tel Aviv International Synagogue. Let me just adjust this a little bit here. Okay. I apologize for the delay. I was simply on the road. And yes, I know that many of my fellow teachers, they, stick to the schedule and they broadcast from all kinds of places. But the truth of the matter is that I prefer to sit in my office and in the quiet and share our half hour together. What's in Hebrew called Koved Rosh, sort of seriousness and calm. Okay, so we left off before Pesach, and I hope your Pesach was enjoyable and meaningful. We left off before Pesach at the beginning of the third chapter of Avot. We discussed the very poignant statement of Akavia ben Mahalalel about the kind of awareness that we're supposed to have on a daily basis. We should know whence we come and where we're going, and before whom we're supposed to make an accounting, meaning before God. The next Mishnah is very interesting in the regard that it's striking. If Akavia ben Mahalalel sort of skips over life, he says, okay, where you come from and where you're born and where you're going, but the middle part he doesn't address. It's a very strange kind of formulation when most of the statements in Pirkei Avot are devoted to precisely giving guidance to people as to how they should use the time that they're given. But okay, it's not. I don't want to speculate too much as to why that was. In any event, the next Mishnah is attributed to Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim. Rabbi Chanina, the assistant of the priests, and his statement is actually quite famous. It goes, Havei mitpalel bishloma shel malchut. Havei is sort of an emphatic. Be careful, or go ahead and really make sure that you pray for the welfare of the kingdom. She'il malei mora'ah, for if it weren't for the fear of the government, if we weren't afraid, if we weren't concerned that the government will impose its will and enforce the law and secure order in the land, Ishad reyehu chayim b'la'o. One person, everybody would sort of swallow each other up. From a halachic point of view, this statement has a number of implications. But let me make a couple of preliminary observations before we get to the halachic issues. Issue number one is Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim obviously has something of a Hobbesian position. Hobbesian observation about the nature of man, because Locke, for example, John Locke, assumed that all governments are based on a contract between free and sober, thoughtful individuals who come together to create a government. Hobbes thought, and that's why Hobbes and the Leviathan thought that Thomas Hobbes thought that, not Calvin and Hobbes. Although I only recently found out that Calvin and Hobbes actually is supposed to invoke John Calvin and Thomas Hobbes. Anyways, Thomas Hobbes in the Leviathan said he's in favor of monarchy, for example, because he says people are basically animals. If you don't have some kind of top-down government that's going to control them, they're going to destroy each other. And that, in fact, is the sort of the sentiment that is being expressed by Rabbi Chanina ben Sgan HaKohanim. So that by itself. Now, he is not, in terms of the outlook on the nature of people, it's not. He's not the only the voice on the issue. For example, one of the underlying one of the underlying themes of the Bible, for example, is the covenantal nature of the Torah, that the covenantal nature of the relationship between man and God, for example. So the Torah is a covenant between God, and God does X for us, and we agree to accept His kingdom, as opposed to some contemporary philosophers. That covenant, once enacted, can never be broken. There are those who argued that in the wake of the Shoah, and others that the covenant between God and man is broken. It can be questioned in terms of justice, but it's not violable. It's inviolate, and it is eternal. It's not. That's just the way it is. In any event, so the idea of a free people entering voluntarily into a governmental relationship is not foreign to Judaism. So that the sort of dour, negative, sort of pessimistic view of mankind that comes to expression in Rabbi Hanina's statement here is not exclusive. It's not the only position that is expressed in Jewish political science. In addition, I would add that there's something of a tremendous irony in Rabbi Hanina's statement. Now, when he lived is not 100% clear, but one thing is clear: he lived in Israel. He lived in Eretz Israel under the Romans. Now, the Romans. The Romans are a story, right? The Romans are the people that destroyed the temple. The Romans are the people who and viciously destroyed the temple and sold Jews off into slavery. And after Bar Kokhba, they did even worse. And once the Roman Empire became Christian, the ongoing kinds of oppression and sometimes active persecution that was undertaken by the Romans was just impossible. And nevertheless, Hanina ben Skana Kohanim is willing, in his context, to say, you know what? On the other hand, there is something to be said for the non-Jewish government, for the simple reason that they do keep order. Otherwise, God knows what would actually happen. What's striking in this regard is the fact that the same kind of conflicted attitude towards the non-Jewish government, which I think emerges from Rabbi Hanina's statement, continues throughout the ages. On the one hand, and I was mentioning halachic implications, the ritual implications of the statement. This is the passage. It's actually there's a verse in Jeremiah where Jeremiah tells the Jews who were exiled in the initial exiles to Babylon to seek the peace or seek the welfare of the country in which they were exiled, meaning Babylonia, which destroyed the temple. Because as long as the government is effective, the Jews will know some kind of security and some kind of peace. And certainly, they won't be subject to ongoing vicissitudes and all kinds of bad developments. That kind of, but on the other hand, talking about the people who destroyed the temple, in both cases, Rome and Babylonia. So this kind of conflicted attitude towards the government continues to characterize the way the Jews relate to the foreign governments in which they live, with the exception of benign democracies like the United States. But up until relatively recently, on the one hand, there was hope that there was sort of this conviction that the central government will protect the Jews and that ultimately things will be much worse without them. On the other hand, there is sort of this feeling that these people are not, big tzaddikim, major righteous individuals. They're not. So that it's interesting. So you could look at Rabbi Hanina as on the one hand asserting a very positive truth about the normative and the foundational and the constructive role of government. On the other hand, sort of a minimalist position that government is not there to educate you, it's not there to culturalize you, but it is there to make sure that everybody behaves. So you come up so as a result, because of this sort of like fundamental conflict that's built into his statement and into the prayers for the for the way the Jews relate to the government. So on the one hand, you find very lovely prayers for the government, included in every single liturgical rite, in every single era, in every single place. One of the oddest. I mean, even for they were prayers for the Hitlerian and Nazi Party. I remember once I was in St. Petersburg, in the Choral Synagogue about 15, 12 years ago or so, and I was sort of wandering around, and I ended up in there's a tower next to the main building, and upstairs in the tower there's an upstairs sort of small chapel, and I found an old synagogue, old siddur, in which there was a prayer for the Politburo of the USSR. Now the USSR, we know, did everything it could to destroy Judaism and to persecute Jews and to wipe out Jewish identity and wipe out Torah. Nevertheless, you pray for the government. The other side of it, of course, is you don't want to be accused of disloyalty, which is like will not end up well. But it's a fundamentally conflicted position. Nevertheless, despite the fact that there certainly is frequently not a lot of love lost from the point of the Jews vis-a-vis the government, and despite the fact that this idea that the government will provide you with fundamental security and fundamental safety is a continuum. Jews, it's a very funny thing. Jews have consistently, through the ages, always developed, this is something that my teacher, Professor Yosef Yerushalmi, once pointed out, have always developed vertical and not horizontal power relationships. What do I mean? When Jews come into a country, when they settle, they always strike deals. They strike the terms of their protection and of their residence and of their economic activity, always with the ruler. Jews traditionally have never made horizontal power relationships. In other words, Jews could be, say in medieval Europe, okay, because it's a field that I know better or best. In medieval Europe, Jews were merchants, and they were moneylenders. They were what we would call middle class. And as the Christian middle class developed, one might have thought that the Jews would find more in common with their fellow middle class residents of whatever city or town or country than with the upper class or with the nobility. And yet the Jews never, really never, ever made alliances horizontally, but always vertically. They always sought the protection, a special deal with the ruler, whether it was a duke, whether it was a bishop, whether it was a king, whether a governor, whatever the case might have been. And that was, and that continues down to this day. A friend of mine pointed out once that traditionally, if you go into a store, and if a Jewish person who has trouble with, a clerk or something, will always go straight to the manager, or it's not to the manager, to the general manager. Go straight to the top. You always talk to the top guy. That's sort of a built-in kind of pattern of behavior that is typical of at least Ashkenazi Jews. I don't know what the story was in Muslim countries. And that's how things played out politically throughout the ages as well. Jews, when they would come into, again, in Christian Europe, did not have any specific basis for their residence, so they would receive their right of residence. This is true all the way down into the modern era, when people would receive citizenship as individuals, but Jews until then received sort of a group license to live, and they got that from the ruler. So they were totally dependent on the ruler, and providing the ruler with some kind of service, whether it's economic or whether it was banking or whatever the case might be, commercial or banking or whatever the case might be, the Jews were totally dependent upon and seeking the favor of the upper class, which ended up actually alienating whatever possible alliances they could have made with their fellow non-Jewish merchants and bankers, for the simple reason that their competition or the struggle between the middle class, the burghers, the bourgeois, and the upper class is one of the classic moments of late medieval up until modern European history. So the Jews were considered the out group, and they were the allies of the bad guys. But at the same time, Jewish history, actually, because of mutual benefit, mutual exploit. You could call it mutual exploitation. Jews Jews found that they really could generally rely on the help or the protection of the government. As I said, until they weren't. In other words, as long as there was a need for Jews, no matter where they were, then you could always depend on the government to protect you. The minute there was no more need for the Jews, so then they would be expelled. That's basically what happened in Spain. That's what happened in France. That's what happened in England. The Jews were expendable, as they say, and then at that point they were tossed out. But up until then, the rulers saw it as part of their responsibility to protect the Jews. Because the Jews were strangers, the Jews were alien, whatever the case might be. Part of the job description of a medieval ruler was, in fact, to protect those who needed protection. So it played into this as well. There's an irony to that. Part of the reason, as I'm saying, it's all of the reason, but part of the reason that the rise of Nazism took German Jews unawares. But part of it was the need to, the disbelief and denial and all kinds of things. But one of the reasons was this is the kind of global racist kind of policy that the Germans, that the Nazi Party espoused, was the exact opposite of this long-standing tradition. You can rely on the government. That's why the Jews expected that once Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, that the Jew hatred would be put aside, because the government per se never always ultimately protects the Jews. It allows a certain amount of persecution, a certain this and that, but in the end of the day, the government is your friend. And here that didn't happen. But you have really odd, almost pathetic things that express the survival of the earlier position in German Jewish history leading up to World War II. For example, there are petitions that were sent to Hitler asking him, as the head of the government, to please call off his stormtroopers because they were violating the sort of social contract between the Jews and the government that had always been in place. And it took a long time to realize that the government here is not filling the role that Chanina Skara Kohanim had in mind. And yet, this idea that the government will always protect the Jews still is very, very, very deeply coded into the DNA of Jewish communities around the world. I mentioned that I'm not that familiar with what was going on in Muslim countries. There is certainly, and this fits the same pattern. There is certainly, from already the time of the Jews and life in the Jews in Spain, a tradition of courtiers, that there's always sort of a court Jew or a series of court Jews who perform services for the king or for the emir, and they are the go-betweens between the Jewish community and the king, and they protect they're meant to protect the Jewish community, and that the king would be their protector. The dynamic is similar; it's not identical, but in both cases, they both express the ultimate expression of what Rabbi Chanina Skara Kohanim is saying here. I would also add that there is, in the run-up to Yom HaShoah this week and Yom HaAtzmaut next week, there is sort of a very powerful expression of Jewish powerlessness here. That we can't take care of ourselves. That we need to rely on others to defend ourselves because we don't have we didn't have sovereignty, and we don't have the ability or the right, according to Muslim law and according to Christian law in many, many places. Jews were not allowed to bear arms. They were not allowed to defend themselves. Again, there were exceptions, but in general, that was the rule. You were dependent on somebody else to defend you. And so you better hope that the king is going to be strong enough and the government is going to be strong enough to defend you, because otherwise things are going to be very bad. So in that little statement, you have if you sort of break it up into its component parts and parse apart its implications, the entire history of the Jewish experience in exile under non-Jewish governments. So that is it for today, and we will see you next week at the usual time at 1 o'clock on Monday next. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll see you. Bye.